New Orleans East, a landscape defined by water, a sprawling network of canals, bayous, and marshes that interweave with suburban life. It's a place where the boundary between civilization and the wild is thin, sometimes non-existent. The waters are murky, the heat is oppressive, and ancient predators, the American alligator, thrive just yards from residential streets. It is here, in the late summer of 2025, that a tragedy unfolded, a story so heartbreaking and complex that it exposed a darkness far deeper than the canals. It is the story of a 12-year-old boy who fled a life of alleged torment, only to escape one horror and immediately fall victim to another. This is the story of Bryan Vasquez. Thursday, August 14th, 2025. The Michoud neighborhood was quiet, the sun not yet risen. At approximately 5:20 a.m., a small figure slipped out of a bedroom window. A nearby doorbell camera captured a haunting, grainy image. It showed 12-year-old Bryan Vasquez walking down the street, alone. He was vulnerable, and he was wearing only a diaper. Bryan was nonverbal. He couldn't call for help. He couldn't explain where he was going, or critically, what he was running from. When his mother, Hilda Vasquez, realized he was gone, she called the New Orleans Police Department. The initial narrative was that of a tragic accident, a disabled child who had wandered off from the family's recently rented home. But here the first crack in the system appeared.
She told his sister that shares a room with him, so he wasn't by himself in the room, he was in the room with his sister, to lock the bedroom door so he doesn't go out. We never imagined that he would go out through a window. It was 5 hours at that point that they hadn't come out. And so we went to the police station because when I called, I was told, ma'am, we already got that call and he's on a, we are waiting for officers to be available to answer this call. I'm sorry, that is not acceptable.
Despite the extreme urgency, a missing nonverbal child in a hazardous area, it reportedly took NOPD officers nearly 5 hours to arrive on the scene. 5 critical hours lost. 5 hours where Bryan wandered further into the dense, unforgiving environment. When the search finally began, it was massive. The NOPD coordinated with multiple agencies. Volunteers flooded the area. The United Cajun Navy, known for their disaster response, deployed airboats into the network of canals. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning the thick reeds, and specialized K9 units, including cadaver dogs, tried to pick up a scent. The terrain in New Orleans East is challenging. The water is opaque, the vegetation dense. For days, the community held its breath. But as the search stretched on, hope began to wane. 12 days. For 12 agonizing days, the search continued.
We need to find him really quickly because we might not know where he is, but we have to find him. He might be somewhere in your house, like in the cameras or something. But you have to check one of those things, like in the forest, stuff like that. Because he needs to eat. He hasn't been eating for probably 6 days.
I'm speaking on behalf of Bryan Vasquez that's nonverbal, but I have a voice. And I'm going to ask y'all to get out of your houses and come out here and pray. Help us.
Then on August 26, 2025, the search came to its devastating conclusion. Bryan's body was discovered in one of the nearby canals. The relief of finding him was immediately shattered by the horrific circumstances of his death. This wasn't a simple drowning. The next day, the Orleans Parish Coroner's Office released the official findings. The cause of death was determined to be drowning, accompanied by significant blunt trauma. The trauma, the report concluded, was consistent with an alligator attack.
Sunday, September 7th, and has been charged with second-degree cruelty to a juvenile and negligent homicide. Keep in mind, this still is an active and sensitive investigation. Our detectives will continue to pursue every fact and every aspect and to any investigative leads.
The news was visceral, horrifying. A vulnerable child fleeing his home met a violent end in the jaws of an alligator. In response, NOPD Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick immediately requested the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries step in to remove nuisance alligators from the canals. It was a necessary action, perhaps, but it felt hollow. Because while an alligator may have ended Bryan Vasquez's life, the investigation was rapidly uncovering a terrifying truth. The predators in the water were not the ones Bryan was fleeing.
Been out here for days, and it's heartbreaking. Very heartbreaking. God be with that little boy.
We are sorry to the Vasquez family for the grief and the pain they continue to suffer.
Couldn't sleep at night, just wondering. We knew that this area was the area that he did enter the water.
I went down on a separate street, launched the drone. This is a thermal drone that is provided by the Cajun Navy. What this drone can do is actually see underneath the water, and that's ultimately when he was spotted.
Afternoon, I did formally request that the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries eradicate nuisance alligators.
He's in desperate need to have his medicine administered several hours ago, so he missed that timeline. We just want to get him in custody safely and reunited with his family so we can get him the necessary medical treatment that he needs.
It's tough. It's a tough situation, and we're trying to come up with a positive resolution, bring him home hopefully alive, but if not, be able to reunite him with his family.
So I still have hope that my son is with someone, maybe alive, and I just want them to return my child.
The real danger lived in the house he escaped. To understand the depth of this tragedy, we have to look past the immediate circumstances of Bryan's death and examine his life. When Bryan was first reported missing, Hilda Vasquez told authorities in the media that Bryan suffered from severe autism. This explanation framed his nonverbal state and his behavior as a medical condition he was born with. It was a lie. As the NOPD Homicide Division took over the investigation, they began pulling records. What they uncovered was a systematic pattern of abuse and neglect spanning Bryan's entire short life. Bryan Vasquez was not nonverbal because of autism. He was nonverbal because of a catastrophic traumatic brain injury inflicted upon him when he was just an infant. We have to go back to 2013. Bryan was only 3 months old. He was brought to the hospital with injuries so severe they shocked the medical staff. He wasn't just sick, he was broken. The infant Bryan had a fractured skull. Both of his legs were broken. One of his lungs had collapsed. These are not injuries a 3-month-old sustains accidentally. Medical professionals quickly determined the injuries were acute and suspicious of non-accidental trauma. The person responsible for inflicting these life-altering injuries? His own mother, Hilda Vasquez. In 2014, the state moved against Hilda. She was charged with cruelty to juveniles and the more severe charge of second-degree cruelty to juveniles. The evidence seemed overwhelming. The injuries were undeniable. The brain injury sustained at this tender age is what left him disabled and unable to speak. Yet the justice system faltered. Faced with serious charges, Hilda Vasquez took a plea deal.
Criminal negligence is more than ordinary negligence. It's a gross deviation from the standard of care of what we would expect from normal parental supervision. If this was a one-off incident where the child just, despite the best efforts of the mother, wandered off and was attacked by an alligator, that'd be one thing. But if the DA charges this case as negligent homicide, they're going to say that's not what we have here.
She pleaded guilty to a drastically reduced charge, negligent treatment. For breaking her infant son's bones and causing permanent brain damage, she received only a suspended sentence and probation. Following the hospitalization and the conviction, the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services, or DCFS, did intervene. Bryan was removed from Hilda's custody and placed into the foster care system. For a time he was safe, but then the unthinkable happened. In what many now see as the most catastrophic failure in this entire case, DCFS later made the decision to reunite the family. Bryan Vasquez, the victim of horrific infant abuse, was returned to the custody of the woman who inflicted his injuries. The decision to reunify the family is a complex and controversial aspect of the child welfare system. But in this case, the decision proved fatal. The abuse did not stop when Bryan returned home. The silence imposed upon him by the brain injury masked the ongoing suffering, but the signs were there. In 2021, just 4 years before his death, DCFS received another report. Bryan had visible bruises on his face and his inner thigh. Furthermore, investigators discovered evidence of severe, prolonged neglect. Reports indicated that Bryan had suffered from tapeworms, not once, but on at least 2 occasions. Tapeworms are parasites often associated with unsanitary conditions and severe neglect.
We know that this is retaliation. We know that this is harassment.
This pointed to an environment where Bryan's basic needs, health, hygiene, and nutrition, were being dangerously ignored.
The mother's completely distraught. She's angry.
Bryan lived in silence, unable to articulate his pain, his fear, or his needs. When we look back at that grainy doorbell camera footage, a 12-year-old boy, disabled, wearing only a diaper, walking away from his house at 5 a.m., it takes on a new meaning. This wasn't a confused child wandering off. This was an escape. He was fleeing a house of horrors.
No parent should ever hear that their child is dead, and in the end of that day, not even midday, they're already taking your only memory of him.
Tragically, in escaping one monster, he ran directly into the path of another. The investigation shifted focus. This was no longer just about a tragic accident in a canal. It was about holding someone accountable for the chain of events that led Bryan to that water's edge. The NOPD Homicide Division worked meticulously, compiling the decades' worth of medical records, the prior convictions, and the DCFS reports. They built a case demonstrating that Bryan's death was the direct result of his mother's long-term negligence and cruelty. On Sunday, September 7th, 2025, nearly a month after Bryan disappeared, New Orleans police arrested Hilda Vasquez. The charges were severe: negligent homicide and second-degree cruelty to juveniles. At a press conference announcing the arrest, NOPD Deputy Superintendent Nicholas Jernan didn't mince words. He emphasized that this was not based on a single incident, but on a lifetime of mistreatment. The legal argument is clear. Hilda Vasquez's actions, spanning over a decade, created the conditions that led directly to Bryan's death. Her abuse left him unable to call for help, her neglect drove him to flee the home, and her failure to protect him ultimately placed him in the path of the Alligator. Hilda Vasquez was booked into the Orleans Parish Jail Central lockup. At her arraignment on September 8th, the state moved to protect her other children. Protective orders were immediately issued, prohibiting her from having any contact with them. But the arrest of the mother does not close the case. It has, instead, opened up difficult questions about systemic accountability. The controversy over the initial police response remains open. Superintendent Kirkpatrick publicly acknowledged that the 5-hour delay in responding to the missing child report was inordinate. An internal investigation by the Public Integrity Bureau is underway. Would a faster response have saved Bryan? It's impossible to know for certain, but the delay represents a missed opportunity, another moment where the system failed to prioritize a child in crisis. Then there is the profound failure of the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services. The decision to return a severely abused, permanently disabled child to the custody of the abuser, who had received only probation for the initial violence, is baffling and tragic. The subsequent reports of bruises and severe neglect suggest that the oversight mechanisms failed completely. Bryan Vasquez fell through every crack in the system designed to protect him. The story of Bryan Vasquez is a difficult one to tell and a difficult one to hear. It is a story that encompasses the worst of human cruelty and the indifferent brutality of nature. It's easy to focus on the sensational details, the alligator attack, but the true horror of this story lies in the 12 years that preceded that fateful morning. Bryan was a child who never had a chance. Robbed of his voice before he could even learn to speak, his life was defined by pain, fear, and neglect. He endured a decade of suffering in silence. His final act was one of desperate bravery, fleeing the abuse he knew, only to meet an unimaginable end in the dark waters of a New Orleans canal. This case is about more than just a shocking headline. It is about the long, slow violence of child abuse and the urgent need for systems that truly protect the vulnerable. Bryan Vasquez deserved safety, he deserved a voice, and he deserved a life he never got the chance to live. Covering stories like Bryan's is essential to demanding accountability. If you found this investigation impactful, please take a moment to like this video. It helps ensure that more people see this crucial story. To support our in-depth reporting and stay updated on future developments, please subscribe and be sure to hit the notification bell. This case raises profound questions about the child welfare system. We want to know your thoughts. How can we better protect the vulnerable? Join the discussion in the comments below. Thank you for watching.